Today on Militaria at the museum, we'll climb into the cockpit of a renowned yellow aircraft that was used for training Canadian fighter pilots. Next, we'll take a look at two types of centuries-old handheld weapons, the kind that warring noblemen preferred when engaging in bloody duels. Finally, we'll examine an unusual map with special properties and discover the fascinating story of how it survived World War II. Beyond museum exhibits lies a hidden realm of archived artifacts that hold the keys to unlocking intriguing stories from the past. Come along as I meet with experts at the Army, Naval, and Aviation museums, where I've been granted special access to pull back the curtains and reveal the secrets of their militaria. My name is Sandy Hiltz, and all my life I've been captivated by military history. Now, I have the rare opportunity to explore a collection of fascinating military artifacts on Militaria at the museum. I'm at the Aviation Museum to learn all about the North American Harvard with museum president Mark People. The Harvard was selected as the primary aircraft of the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan to train fighter pilots in Canada throughout World War II. If a pilot couldn't command the Harvard, he would not become a pilot in the Royal Canadian Air Force. Mark, I know about a lot of the fighting planes of the Second World War, Spitfires, Mosquitoes, Hurricanes, but what I don't know is about what they were using to train to get to that level.
Well, there was one particular aircraft, the Harvard, which we have an example of here. Why don't we take a look at it?
That'd be great.
The North American Harvard is a two-seat training aircraft designed to train pilots, and it was designed just prior to the start of the Second World War in 1938. It's really just a two-seat trainer that's designed to basically train pilots with a minimal flight time to actually fly larger, more powerful aircraft like the fighters. And Harvards were stationed across the country at service flying training schools to train pilots.
I'd love to get a look inside.
Absolutely, let's jump up in. It's like mounting a horse, so get ready for that. So, pop the canopy back. And if you follow the same way that I did it, along that, there you go.
Foot here?
Yep, right foot there, and then swing yourself over on the top and pop yourself in.
So this is pretty well what I would be seeing if I was in the cockpit of a Mustang or a Spitfire or something like that.
To some degree, yeah, and even the control column that you see in front of you, that's an actual, it's called a Dunlop grip, but that actually is in Spitfires, Hurricanes, any RAF plane use that spade grip design. And actually that brass button is actually a gun button. And you can turn it on, that's on, and then turn it off.
So though they were trainers, this would have been equipped with a gun?
You could put a gun on that right wing, single 303, and it was more used for just basic training, just so you could actually get the sense of firing off a gun.
Right.
Obviously, you've got undercarriage now, which in the initial training aircraft, they didn't have retractable undercarriage, so you got to manage that. It's another feature of setting it up when you're landing. You're obviously sitting on your parachute, so your parachute's strapped to you, so in case you have to get out, you step out and jump.
So there's no ejector seat in this
No
plane.
ejector seat, no. It's just blowing yourself out. Make sure that the parachute's pretty tight on you. So your basic instruments, you can see altitude, climb, direction, compass, settings. You've got temperatures. That's all in front of you. And then you've got various other systems. And then on the left-hand side, you've got your throttle, which is obviously your power up and down.
Is it quite a difficult plane to fly?
It is. It's not easy. It's actually easier to fly the fighters than it is this particular aircraft. If you can master a Harvard, you can pretty much jump into a Mustang or a Spitfire or a Hurricane, or depending on those sort of World War II era fighters, single seat fighters.
So I'm sure that while these planes directed a lot of people towards being pilots, that it picked out a lot of individuals who wouldn't be getting behind the controls of a plane again.
Right. I mean, there's certainly a lot of washouts at this point too. I mean, if you pass the initial training, that was hard enough, but then getting into a Harvard and then trying to master this plane, it was another step higher. So
Right. Mark, we talk about these different models. Some were produced in Canada and some in the United States. Is that right?
yeah, North American Aviation actually did build this one in California, but a production line was set up at Nordyne Aircraft in Montreal to build Harvards during the war. Nordyne Aircraft in Montreal built them during the wartime, and then even Canadian Current Foundry built a number of Harvards post-war. Even today, there's still Harvards around being used to train pilots to fly the existing Mustangs and Spitfires and such that still fly today.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's still used as a training aircraft for those air fighter planes.
Yeah, even today, I mean, it's still that next step into the aircraft. When you're putting pilots that don't have experience with these type of tail dragging aircraft, this is what experience is going to give you.
Right. What is the overall impact of the Harvard?
The Harvard it's the pilot maker, I guess is the best description of the Harvard. That's what it's done, it made pilot. The Harvard, I think, is another of these iconic training aircraft. If you talk about training aircraft, everyone thinks, oh, okay, I think of the Harvard, or I think of the, as we call it in Canada, or the Texan, which they call it in the States. And of course, all services in the United States use the Harvard. The U.S. Navy used in training, as well as the United States Army Air Corps during the Second World War. So lots of people have been trained with it. Every pilot's probably been through a Harvard or Texas at some point.
What is it that makes the Harvard sort of such an iconic plane? Is it that yellow coloring? You know, when I think of it, I sort of think of it as a giant driver training sticker, really, that yellow paint job. Is that sort of what's led to it being so iconic?
Well, as they say, the yellow wings have kind of been synonymous with the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan. I mean, because every training aircraft was painted yellow that was flown, but other countries had used different colors, or they put bright red or orange on them to make them stand out.
Now, would you be starting off in a piston engine aircraft today if you were training for the Air Force?
No, you'd obviously start off in a smaller aircraft, but actually, interestingly enough, the main training equivalent today is called the Harvard II.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's full circle now that the original Harvard is, if you want to train in the RCF, they'll put you in a Harvard II.
Are they still bright yellow?
They're painted dark blue.
Oh, right.
There are lots of Harvards flying in the world today, and you can get into a Harvard in lots of places, and then you can actually fly them. Even today, you can go out and fly them.
I have to say, Mark, if we could fire it up, I feel pretty confident I could get this thing up in the air.
I'm sure you could, Sandy, but it's getting it down is probably the harder point.
Coming up after the break, I'll visit the Army Museum to learn about the evolution from swords to pistols as the preferred weapons of dueling noblemen fighting for their honor. At the Army Museum, I'm meeting with Kevin Robbins to discuss the dangerous practice of dueling to settle disputes and how it evolved with the times from the 12th century into the 19th. What began as a fight to the death using melee weapons eventually developed into a personal conflict using special dueling pistols. Kevin, I'm really interested in the early history of dueling, and I was wondering if you could show me some things relating to it.
Yes, we've got some pieces laid out here, and these will directly answer any questions you might have about the tradition of settlements of arguments, we'll say.
Excellent. Kevin, obviously the earlier piece of dueling equipment we're looking at here is the sword. What can you tell me about this specific one?
That is just like a dress sword from the third quarter of the 18th century. These blades evolve out of the Italian rapiers from the 17th century. Rapiers become shortened into what we call an épée, or a small sword, and those in the late 17th and early 18th century are a almost like a prerequisite element of a gentleman's personal belongings. Gentlemen always carry swords.
Right.
It's like a mark of a gentleman. And by the 18th century, every gentleman, a man of means, would have a small sword like this, an épée, that he'd use when he's out and around. You have a split in your suit coat, right?
Right.
That is a vestige from the time when men carried swords. To this day. That's it, because your sword has to go through your coat.
Of course.
This is very typical of the type of blade that you'd use during a duel. All the functions are here. There's a guard here to protect your hand and your fingers. Again, a nice, quick, light sword. These things move really fast in terms of in a skilled hand. And again, it's triangular. So again, it's designed so that that will ease into or through something, we'll say.
Kevin, would this have been an official form of justice, or was it merely a convenient way of settling disputes amongst gentlemen?
Well, again, it is even in the 18th century. You can call someone out, you're expected to show up, but at the same time, it's not legal per se. Okay? By the 1760s, there's a sort of switch in the whole practice of dueling from away from swords, which can be no less dangerous or lethal, but to a more assured sense of violence. And if you really wanted to put someone in the ground, handguns.
Obviously, Kevin, we're dealing with very different weapons when we talk about the sword and the pistol. How would the rules of dueling change when that movement happened?
In 1777, there are some gentlemen in Ireland who write down the regulations like how a duel should be properly conducted. This is well into that period now, especially in Ireland, where handguns are becoming the choice for an aggrieved party to settle something. Now, the biggest thing that changes is the level of mortality, okay? After a point in between the wars, the British Army in Ireland and other places, they start to lose as many officers sometimes to duels as they do to combat.
Really?
Dueling is that prevalent. Yeah, dueling is an enormous thing, okay? It's all about your honor, saving face. If you don't turn out for a duel, you're marked forever as a coward, okay? So dueling, it was a way, again, for the upper classes to settle personal disputes using basically the code of honor that gentlemen are all supposed to live by. Other European countries outside of Great Britain have different traditions, but essentially it always comes down to the same thing. Challenge is made, it must be accepted. Otherwise, the person who's challenged will be viewed as a coward. And again, you lose your place and face in the society that you are a member of.
Kevin, this is a really beautiful example of a dueling pistol. What can you tell me about it?
This pistol is made in the third quarter of the 18th century by the gun-making firm of William Boyd. So this is made in London. And this has a wonderful sort of example of some of the old elements of a gentleman's pistol. It has a brass barrel. Here on the butt plate, it has what's known as a grotesque in terms of the style. These go back to the early 18th century in terms of this butt plate. Here's a variant, though, moving towards a modern handgun, is this extra balance under the guard. It allows you, again, to just have a better hold on the weapon. It has, again, a classic swan necks hammer here, beautiful brass inlay, checkered for a good grip, an Estoujant plate where you can put your initials, okay? Maker's marks here. This is something that belongs to someone of certain wealth and a certain position. This is an expensive firearm.
Kevin, I understand this particular pistol has quite an interesting history behind it.
It does. This is one of the two matched or a match set that belong to the Uniacke family. So this pistol, or one of the two, was used by the youngest son of Richard John Uniacke when he challenged our great editorialist, Joseph Howe.
Really?
Yes, so this pistol will be one of the ones used during the duel between Howe and Richard John Uniacke's youngest son, who challenges Howe. You're not a gentleman, you're the worst kind of fellow. So he's openly challenged. So Joseph Howe, again, with these long traditions, he has to show up. Now, when he fires, young Uniacke, he misses, okay? So that's his shot. And again, Howe, just being slightly more enlightened
Right.
in a rational mind. He stands his ground, takes aim with his pistol, and then, and he has to stand there. And that's the thing, you have to stand there and take fire.
Right.
So Howe aims at him, but then Howe takes his pistol and he fires it in the air. That's the end of the duel, okay? And no one can ever call Joseph Howe out again as being a coward and a reprobate or anything, because he has played their game and he bests them at it, right? That's one of the most famous duels in the 19th century, right? And it's well documented.
Kevin, would there still have been a sense of honor towards the end of the life of dueling, or was this something that was sort of having to go underground and be increasingly secret?
Well, it is always somewhat underground. Again,
Right.
like I was saying, it's well known that everyone does this, but it is technically illegal. But with that, by 1844, again, like I said, it's a great way to set someone up to kill them. So you lose a lot of talented officers to this ongoing sort of personal feuds and vendettas they have. By 1844, it's not until that late date that dueling is absolutely out of the question, not as an illegal endeavor.
Kevin, thank you for showing me the evolution from swords to pistols in the art of dueling. It's been very interesting to go through both the items themselves as well as the backstory behind them.
Sure, my pleasure. Thanks for coming.
When we return, I'll hear the fascinating story of how a unique World War II map found its way from the English Channel to the Naval Museum of Halifax. Today at the Naval Museum, Lisa McNiven and I are going to take a closer look at a rice paper map of France that was used by a fighter pilot during World War II. I'm on a mission to find out more about this unique map and to hear how it was discovered at a crash site in the English Channel.
Lisa, I understand here at the museum you have a map made out of all things rice paper.
It's a really interesting piece of cartography that I've never seen before, and it was in a collection that was donated in 1984 by Commander Evan Petley Jones. It's in the archives. Would you like to go see?
Absolutely.
I'll just pull it from the shelf and we can look at it in the main room.
Oh, that would be excellent. Oh my, look at that. I have to say, Lisa, it's shockingly vivid for the fact that it was in the English Channel and then has spent so many years in a box in the archives here.
Exactly. It's absolutely pristine and vivid and in wonderful condition, considering what it's made of. Rice paper has been used for centuries, but the emphasis on the rice paper during World War II was to create something that was thin, malleable, and easy to stash and not to crinkle when it was being unraveled. It was either to be put inside a lining of a jacket or a pocket, and it was easily accessed.
As you said, I mean, the condition is just incredible. Lisa, what can you tell me about where the map was originally found?
The map was originally found on a body of a downed RCAF pilot in the autumn of 1941 in the English Channel near Dover by a motor launch sub-lieutenant, and his name was Evan Petley Jones. Mr. Petley Jones donated this in 1984. He was 65 years at the time, and this was part of a large collection that he donated to the Naval Museum.
So some of these were things that he actually personally recovered during the war, were they?
Yes.
Do we know anything about the pilot it was picked from, Lisa?
Unfortunately not. When the pilot was retrieved, he had obviously passed. They went through his personal possessions, and he was buried at sea.
So Lisa, we know that it was Evan Petley Jones that donated the map to the museum, but what can you tell me about who he was?
I had found in our collection a photo of Mr. Petley Jones.
Really?
And there he is to the right.
And it's always so nice when you can connect people with the artifacts like that, isn't it, Lisa?
It is. I love finding photos in the collection. This is Mr. Jones in 1952.
Right.
He had a long-standing naval career. He actually had ancestors going back to around 1780 through the British Navy that had joined. So I have a feeling it was part of a family tradition.
And then when he brought this map and a few other pieces to the museum, did he leave much of a story behind about it?
There was a letter associated with the map, and it gives a brief outline of the conditions where the map was found, the downed RCAF pilot, and what happened afterwards.
Lisa, being as these are produced on such a delicate material, I would imagine these maps are quite rare.
I've done a bit of research into the topic, and I've only been able to find about 3 online auction houses that have actually sold these maps over the years.
Really?
Yeah.
That's quite something, given the number that you would imagine were produced during the war.
Exactly. As far as I can tell, these rice paper maps are incredibly rare. I had difficulty finding a museum collection that would have rice paper, so I have a feeling they're more in private hands right now. From what I can understand in my research, this was probably made in Edinburgh by a map maker called Mr. Bartholomew. And it was simply called Bartholomew Maps, made 1940. But these maps were only made from 40 to 41. The rice paper that was being produced in Edinburgh during the 1940s was a combination of starch, fibers, rice, and also mulberry.
Do we know anything more about his map making and possibly the contribution to the war effort or anything?
Well, from my research, I've come to understand that Mr. Bartholomew was actually paid by the British war effort to create these early renditions of rice paper maps. The first map had the designation of A, and this map has the designation of D. These maps were only made from around 1940 to 1941, and then there was a transition to silk maps, but these maps were still in use up until around 1942, and then they were phased out. Overseas, during World War II, approximately 13,000 RCAF airmen went down over the course of the war years, lost in action. RCAF, and I suspect also the British Air Force, would have both carried these rice paper maps early in wartime, but 42 onward production changes from rice to silk. Silk was being transferred onto fabric, and that was being used as a form of paper or cartography.
What else can you tell me about the map, Lisa?
I find the last reference in Mr. Petley Jones' note interesting. His last line is, "It can be eaten if captured." So rice paper, obviously edible. How it survived being in the English Channel for an unknown amount of time is an absolute mystery to me, considering it is water soluble.
Right, that is very remarkable. Well, I have to say, it's been a real pleasure being able to take a look at this today, Lisa, and to uncover the story of Evan Petley Jones and how it made its way here to the museum. Thank you for taking it out of the archives for me today.
You're welcome.
Having special access to go beyond museum exhibits reveals some of history's best-kept secrets and most interesting stories. Thank you for joining me in this exploration of military artifacts on another episode of Militaria at the museum.